Next, we're going to show you how to arrange pattern pieces for simulation. In this lesson, we will cover the following: arrange, import avatar, and prepare. Arranging the pattern pieces is a necessary part of building a 3D garment. In this step, we are letting the simulation know where on the avatar the pattern pieces should drape from. This step is comparable to pinning paper pattern pieces to a dress form. Arranging the pattern pieces properly improves the simulation output. Before we can arrange the garment, let's be sure we are working with the correct avatar. Referencing the technical specification sheet, we see the avatar for this garment is Olivia Denham. This avatar is available for download from the lesson summary as a VSA file. Pause here if you need to download the avatar. To import an avatar, we go to the Resources panel, 3D tab, Avatars. If your 3D window is not open, we can hover the mouse in the 2D window, then use the Tab key on our keyboard. Our 3D window shows. To import an avatar, click the plus sign and import. A File Explorer window will appear. Select the VSA. The avatar now shows in our 3D window. This avatar is saved in the Avatar tab and can be accessed for dressing other garments. We can change the avatar texture. With your mouse over the avatar, right-click and use Avatar Textures. Let's choose White Mannequin. Now we can arrange the garment. To go to Arrange mode, we click the Arrange button. The pattern pieces are displayed in the Arrange mode version of the 2D window. The position of the pattern pieces does not change from the standard 2D window. Note that setting up the pattern pieces in the 2D window before going into Arrange mode can smooth the workflow. Let's enlarge the 2D window. We now see a view of the right side, front, left side, and back of an avatar shape. In each view, there are light gray sections of the body. These sections are called clusters. In Arrange mode, we drag each piece to the cluster it should drape from when the garment is simulated. For example, let's start by arranging the front yoke pattern piece. As we drag it into position, a labeled bounding box is displayed to help us ensure we put the piece in the right cluster. If we make a mistake, we can simply drag the piece out of the cluster. If the pattern is symmetrical, its symmetrical copy will also be added into the cluster automatically. When we add a pattern into the cluster, it means the pattern is visible in the 3D window. To view the patterns in 3D, we click on Prepare on the main toolbar. This is the Prepare mode. Moving the pattern in the 2D window moves the pattern in the 3D window and the other way around. Now we can continue to arrange the patterns into clusters. Let's add the rest of the front top of the dress. We can multi-select or marquee select the patterns and drag them into the torso cluster. When arranging pattern pieces, we want the patterns to sit close together but not overlapping. We can adjust the placement of the patterns in the clusters as needed. We will add the placket to the torso cluster as well. When dragging a pattern into a cluster, notice the position of your mouse cursor. The mouse cursor should be in the gray area that indicates the cluster where you want to place the pattern. For example, when dragging the placket into the torso cluster, when the mouse is within the gray area of the torso cluster highlights. We place the patterns in the cluster that position them closest to where they will be on the body when dressed. This means that a particular pattern type does not need to be placed in a specific cluster. For example, the waistband of the dress can be placed in the torso cluster or in the low waist cluster. When we place the waistband in the torso cluster, it shows flat like the other pieces in the cluster. When we place the waistband in the low waist cluster, it shows curved. Each cluster has wrap types that position the patterns around the body in different ways. The same applies to the skirt. We can drag the pattern and place our cursor close, but not on the leg clusters. There, we see the skirt cluster appear and we can drop the pattern in. The skirt pattern is prepared flat on the avatar in the 2D window. We repeat this for the back patterns. For the sleeves, we drag the patterns into the right and left arm cluster. Place the cuffs in the wrist cluster. Place the collar in the back neck cluster. Now let's refine the prepare position of the patterns in the 3D window. As a best practice, we want to ensure 4 key elements so that our patterns are placed in optimal positions. 1. Each piece is lined up to where it would sit on the body. 2. Each piece is correctly lined up with where each piece is connected to. 3. Each piece is as close to the avatar body as possible without going through the avatar. 4. Each edge has space between to see most edges without overlapping. This will help later when we learn about stitching in another video. Now let's look at how we can move pieces. To do this, we choose the Select tool and then click the cluster we want to move. Let's start with the skirt. The object that appears on the selected cluster is a 3D gizmo. Each arrow and circle moves or rotates the pattern piece in the indicated direction. Let's have a closer look at how the 3D gizmo works. When our mouse is hovering over a gizmo direction, the line becomes yellow. This helps us select the right part of the gizmo to execute the movement we want. The green arrow moves the clusters up and down. The red arrow moves the clusters left and right. And the blue arrow moves the clusters forward and backwards. Note: remember to navigate your 3D window so it's easy to see the movements of the clusters. Using the circles on the 3D gizmo, we can rotate the clusters. At the end of each gizmo direction is a cube. Clicking and dragging these cubes scale the pattern, but only for simulation purposes. This means that even though the pattern is smaller or larger in the prepare mode after scaling, the pattern measurements are not changed, and it will revert to its original size when you dress the garment. We can reset the pattern rotation and scale by selecting the Reset button. Finally, note that the available directions on the gizmo are dependent on the cluster to which the piece belongs. For example, the torso cluster has all the directions available, whereas the waistband cluster has more limited options. When moving patterns in prepare mode, notice how the whole cluster moves and not a single pattern piece. If you would like to move a single pattern piece within a cluster, press and hold the Control key on your PC keyboard or Command for Mac, and select the pattern you want to move. Use the arrow to adjust the position. Also note that we are not able to move a single pattern within a cluster forward and backwards or rotate it. Take a moment to adjust your patterns in Prepare using the gizmo. Remember the 4 key elements for arranging. We now have our patterns arranged. Let's save our file. In this video, we have learned how to arrange and prepare. For more information on the topics covered in this lesson, refer to the video description.